Yes, so thank you, Jostein, and thank you all for joining this webinar, which will also be videos. Of course, many of you know where Svalbard is, and that Svalbard is a geologic paradise. So the whole concept of Svalbox is to put a lot of information we know about Svalbard geology in one place. What we're going to do today, we're going to have a presentation. I'm going to try to break it up with some videos, which actually some of the team put together, and also show you some of the functionality. I think it's sometimes easier to do through video. And all these videos are also available on YouTube and the website. And then, as Jostein said, please put your questions into the chat or even get in contact with me afterwards. So what is Svalbox? Svalbox is an integrated and interactive database that we use in teaching and research. We started it in 2016. You can go to the Svalbox on our website, and it's really run by a few of us just on the side of the research and teaching. We really want to use it much more in partner universities and also in the industry. And I have some industry background. I want to see, actually, that's why I think also iEarth is so relevant here, is to provide, we don't just teach geoscientists to be in academia, but we teach them for the real world problems. And we also struggle a little bit, and what we really need, we need a full-time position to follow up. Anyway, who are Svalbox? It's our baby, a bunch of us. I'm been at UNIS now since about 5 years in an associate professor position, but I also have some background from both EMGS and Bayerngas in industry. And then we have Peter Betlem, who is actually spending about 25% of his position is funded by UNIS, the rest is external, but he works a lot with the outreach and data management. So he is the kind of coder behind Svalbox and also the drone pilot. We've got Tom, who you'll hear about in one of the videos. He's a PhD student funded by Arcex, but he also been teaching assistant this year at a course at UNIS we have. And there are many more, both collaborators, UNIS students, staff, who are kind of contributing here. And one person who deserves special mention is also Ola Smirak-Sikora, because she came up with the Svalbox name as well as providing input. So that's a little bit about us. We contacted, and then let's move to Svalbard. So that's the kind of challenge we have when we are teaching geology on Svalbard. We essentially have a couple of field seasons. The spring field season, March, April, you drive around snowmobile, you look at outcrops. It's also the time when our bachelor course package, consisting of AG222 and AG209, is running. So actually, we really rely on these digital tools in these courses. And then we've got the summer field season, which is June, July, August, maybe a little bit of September, when we have a lot of master PhD level courses. What's this? What's the problem here? Well, we have snow cover a lot. We don't have good access. It's not so easy to get out. So we need to use digital tools. And one of the tools which really emerged within the last 5 years are these virtual outcrop models or digital outcrop models, which have been around for a few decades in terms of LiDAR acquisition. But now with photogrammetry, you can get them at a fraction of the cost. And this is an example of these digital outcrop models or virtual outcrop models, which we collect and we include and share through this Svalbox database. And that way we can really extend these field seasons. And I'll come back to it at the end of the webinar, but of course, we all know that the spring field season this year has been essentially written off due to the pandemic, but we can use this tool to still keep on our teaching. So I introduced these virtual outcrop models. I'll tell you how to get them eventually. There's also other data types which are integrated with these virtual outcrop models. And then we have these two, let's move this around. We have these two kind of visualization toolboxes. We've got the online portal at svalbox.no, where we share the digital outcrop models and other data sets. But we also have this Petrel version, and it's all linked to ArcGIS database. So virtual outcrop models are georeference models of outcrops, digital outcrops really. Easy to acquire, easy to process. They are hosted right now on a kind of standard platform Sketchfab and embedded on the web page. And then where do we visualize these? We have this internal Svalbox, which we use at UNIS in courses, based in Petrel, a lot of data, control access. And then we've got this online Svalbox, which is open essentially to everybody. And you'll see videos of both of these during this webinar. So how do we link the input data to actually the end user? Well, we've got this big cooking pot. We've of course got the folder with the data. We've got the different Petrel projects with different type of data, the geodatabase, and then we've got this online portal. And we have to fill this melting pot with the virtual outcrop models, which we acquire and process, export. And we also, of course, keep all the input data. The input data for these virtual outcrop models is photographs. And of course, over the years, it's quite a lot of improvement in processing, so we can reprocess, as you do, for example, in seismic industry, quite regularly. Other data type, it's not really standard formats or standard procedures, but they are essentially trying to get hold of everything and anything relevant to Svalbard, and load it, georeference it, digitize paper logs, convert formats, and so on. Also look at the access rights and so on, and essentially connect to online repositories, for example, from the Polar Institute, Norwegian Polar Institute. What do we do once we have it, database? Okay, we can move these, make these accessible to the end user. We update the data. We also build up storylines around it. It's called virtual field trips. We maintain the database, and then we also update. Usually a couple of times a year, we hire a master student for a month or so to add new data, for example, from publications. So I think that was a very short introduction of Svalbox, but I think now what we'll do, we'll move on to actually about 9-minute video from Tom Birchall. We just put together just for this webinar about this Svalbox to introduce you to it. So let's hope you will hear also the sound. It's been tested. And here comes the first video. It takes about 9 minutes.
Hello everyone. This is an introduction to the Svalbox digital database. If you hadn't guessed by the video, Svalbox is to do with the geology of Svalbard. The Svalbard has an amazing geological history and an amazing history of geologists and other scientists who have collected immense amounts of data over the decades. The Svalbox database is essentially our effort to gather this data so it can be easily accessed and put into the context of Svalbard's unique geological history. So here we can see some of the data already imported into Svalbox. This includes regional data like cross-sections or geophysics, and more locally focused information from outcrops and boreholes, and of course everything in between. Because of this great diversity in data, we have decided that Schlumberger's software Petrel is the best platform to host the Svalbox database. Let's start off by going to one of the more studied areas of Svalbard, a place on the west coast called Festningen. So Festningen is classed as a geotope. This is because of the exceptional outcrops along the coastline here, and this even includes some well-preserved dinosaur tracks. So these coloured symbols that we can see here represent sedimentary logs that have been taken from different points along the outcrop. And what we can see here is the map updating itself every time we zoom in or out to make sure we see the appropriate level of detail for the scale that we're using. So before we look at the data itself, let's just have a quick look at what makes Festningen so special. We can see the vertical rock bedding here. This means you can take a walk along the beach to the west and see hundreds of millions of years of the Earth's history as you walk by. A quick search on Google Scholar shows 696 results just for this outcrop. This really highlights why we're trying to get all this useful data together into one place. This here is a sedimentary log from that prominent sandstone we can see right below us. Now what we can do is display this alongside other sedimentary logs from this same area. At first glance, these 4 logs from different parts of the outcrop seem to be quite similar, but when we look in more detail we can actually see that they cover very different intervals. The log on the right hand side is very detailed and covers about 20 meters of sandstone, while the image second from the left covers more than 2,000 meters of geology. We can independently change each log to a scale they were initially drawn for, but we can also put them all to the same scale, and this really helps highlight the different resolutions of the data, and it shows how complex geology really is in nature. For a little visualization exercise, we can show how this sandstone log, which still contains extremely important geological information, would look in the scale of this entire outcrop log. So we've dealt with the outcrop scales at this location, but how does this all fit in regionally? Firstly, we can link the outcrops here to what we see in seismic data. This data covers several tens of kilometers, but obviously this infers geology at a much lower resolution. Secondly, we can use published cross-sections from throughout Svalbard from a variety of sources and at different scales. In this case here that we're looking at, we can see regional to semi-regional cross-sections that have been published in the Geoscience Atlas of Svalbard. When we zoom in, we can see a cross-section of the geology. We can see that the rocks are much more tilted in the west, and this helps us understand why the rocks we saw at Festningen are almost upright. We also know that this was caused by a mountain forming event about 60 million years ago. Let's jump on our snowmobiles and head east to where the geology is a little more horizontal. Back at Festningen, we could see huge amounts of time along a single outcrop, but quite little spatial variety in that geology. In this area we can see big lateral changes in the geology, but over shorter timescales. To see further back in time here, we would have to go down into the ground. So that's exactly what we're going to do. This is the Ishugda hydrocarbon exploration well. It was drilled in 1966. It is the deepest wellbore in Svalbard at 3.3 kilometers depth. In addition to showing us the deeper geology, these wellbores also collect a whole suite of physical and chemical data of the rocks they drill through. We'd not normally be able to get such data from the outcrops at the surface due to weathering and chemical alteration. On the right, we can see some of the data from such wells used in a Senger et al. Publication from 2019. So what we can do is link this subsurface well data to the subsurface seismic data. These 2D seismic lines are situated along the Rheindalen Valley to the north. As we move east along the seismic line, we can see another exploration well. This was probably drilled based on seismic data. We can see a geological structure in the data below the well, and I've interpreted it to look something like this. But what we do know is that this is a rift basin because we can see it in outcrops to the north. Now if we want to look at what other data is available around us, we can go back to the map view. Here we can actually see that there are a few sedimentary logs in the area that we might be interested in. We can see information about the log in its name, including the formation it covers, and we can also click on the map here to find out more detailed information about the location. As with previous examples, we can change the settings in these logs to our liking, which can be useful if we want to correlate important geological units throughout the area, or perhaps see how it has been impacted by this underlying structure we see in the seismic data. So talking of that structure, let's just go and have a look at it at the surface in Billefjorden. The Billefjorden fault zone is a great example of a rift basin, and UNIS leads several field courses there for both undergraduates and postgraduate students. In this section we'll have a look at some of the work they have carried out with the use of Svalbox data. This is drone footage of Mimabukta Beach, which is just south of Pyramiden. At the bottom of the screen you can see where students made a virtual outcrop model and combined it with structural measurements from the field in order to analyse a big fault that's actually invisible to the naked eye. Fieldwork has been hampered by the coronavirus this year, which is 2020. In the AG 222 undergraduate course at UNIS, students were unable to go into the field, and while there is no real replacement to fieldwork, they were able to complete a comprehensive assignment on the Billefjorden fault zone from Svalbox data. Their assignment was to analyse all available data, to work out the geological history of the area, and to apply for a fictive drilling licence in one area where they thought finding hydrocarbons is most likely. Here we can see where a group have made surfaces in patrol for the important formations in the basin. This is based on outcrop logs, published cross-sections, seismic and well data. The flat blue line is the sea level in the fjord. Here are a few examples of figures the students of AG 222 produced for their assignment using Svalbox tools and available literature. On the left, the group have made a map of their prospect based on their geological surfaces and fault interpretation. The black symbol marks their proposed fictional well location. On the right are a north-south and east-west cross-section of a prospect from a different group. Here on the left we can see another cross-section, but this one's on a more regional scale, and on the right the group have made a virtual well to estimate what depths they would expect to encounter each formation. And finally, this group have made a petroleum systems chart. This highlights the important past geological events of the Billefjorden fault zone. That concludes our mini tour of a few stops in Svalbard. But going back to the issue of scale, and what we try to do is capture the important geological information that allows us to put it all into context. In geology, it is impossible to understand the big things without understanding the small things, and it's impossible to understand the detailed things without understanding the big regional things. Perhaps the biggest scale that we're dealing with is actually the amount of data available to us. Svalbox is by no means a complete database, and at present only has a fraction of what we'd like to include. But what is important to remember is that whatever people may say, in geology at least, size matters.
Okay, so hope you have got a good overview of what Svalbox is and also how it's used in teaching. And it's just a summary of all the data which Tom was also going through, the subsurface data. What's important here is that because we have loaded it all into the Petrel project, all of these data points are within a sort of XYZ coordinates, so you can go and click actually on these maps and see them. You can overlay geologic maps on the terrain model, so on. You can stream in these important GIS-map services to know where you are, terrain models, profiles, seismic data, and so on. Now let's move a bit more in detail at these digital outcrop models or virtual outcrop models and some of the highlights we have with working with Svalbox over the last years. And actually it was just last year we had the first acquisition trip focusing on most of these virtual outcrop models. We used this boat Glione. We also sampled some igneous intrusions here with Olivier and Ola from University of Oslo. And we, this is an example of one of these models here from a drone at Skansen, where we take a lot of pictures and get very nice georeference models. How do you get these? Just from the images. So you take a lot of images, overlap, maybe 80%. It can be from the ground. This example is actually using an iPhone. And then you do processing to get a dense point cloud and surface mesh, photorealistic texturing, and you can do some things with the models, looking at, for example, deep azimuth, fracture pattern, sedimentology to correlate between two logs. And we really are working together, also a group in Harriet, what to optimize this workflow to get more data out of these digital outcrop models and bring this information on towards industry standard geomodels. So playground, it's also it's very nice to have this Svalbox linked to the AG222 course at UNIS. Here's an example for those not having seen this before. So virtual outcrop model example from outcrop south, just north of Grönsteinfjellet on the beach. I took about 15 minutes to acquire these 79 images using a drone. Outcrop is about 80 meters, 60 meters long. And I'm particularly interested in this relatively thin 59 centimeter thick sill and the aureoles and the fractures around it. We actually processed it by the time we were back in town on the boat. Another example from the same campaign, a bit larger scale. It took about 2 hours to process as we were steaming up Dixonfjorden. So I was taking with the DSLR, just sitting on top of the boat and taking photos of this essentially 10-kilometer section. And we are, while it's kind of on the seismic scale, we are getting, of course, much lower resolution than from being close up, but it's still very much usable. But it's not just the outcrops, it's also how do you integrate these virtual outcrops with other type of data, in this case, GPR. So this is actually a work from Julian Janocha, who recently defended his master thesis at UNIS and Uni Potsdam. And we have actually a very short video just to illustrate his master project and how he integrates these data points. So I want to share it with you. Just this is an example of Julian. I'll come back to what's he doing out here, and then we can look at his master thesis, because also these master projects often feeding quite a lot of important data to Svalbox. So let's look at Julian's overview in 4 minutes.
Hey everybody, I'll just quickly give you a brief overview of what I have done for my master thesis. My main focus was to study the depositional evolution of the Forted Paleokarst breccia outcrop. For one of the 2 summer field campaigns, we had a tent camp up at the plateau east of Forte. Another objective of my thesis was to acquire GPR profiles. Most of the profiles were acquired by sitting on a sledge and being pulled by a scooter. But first, let me tell you more about the geology. Part of my study was to look at the beach outcrop at Rudnuspunten. As we have learned just before, we expect to find breccias related to the dissolution and collapse of the Minkenfjellet gypsum beds. I will not go into much more detail here. I'll just show you quickly my outcrop description. In the eastern section of the outcrop, we have the carbonate benches of the Minkenfjellet formation. Here they're displayed in pink. In light purple, we see some of the carbonate benches to indicate the tilt of the carbonates. The majority of the section is characterized by a green color, which represents the Paleokarst breccias. I would like to draw your attention now to the transition from the Paleokarst breccias to the Minkenfjellet carbonates. What we see here is that the dip of the carbonate benches and the dip of the transition are the same. This dip parallel transition is one of the characteristics for the base of evaporite Paleokarst breccias. What we see here is the paleocave floor. Now we come back to the GPR. I'll only show you the profiles behind Rudnuspunten. I acquired profiles both parallel and perpendicular to the outcrop. For visualization and interpretation, I imported the profiles into Lime. To ensure a consistent interpretation, I introduced 3 GPR facies, colored in green, pink and purple. The green colored sections are characterized by diffracted signals, whereas the pink colored areas show westward dipping reflectors. The purple sections are characterized by horizontal reflectors representing quaternary scree-slope deposits. These are only seen in the northern parts of the survey area. Now we will take one of the outcrop parallel profiles and change the position. By the way, sorry for not displaying the GPR facies on the profile. I forgot to do that. As a reminder, the left should be green, whereas the right should be pink. First observations are that the dipping reflectors in the east are aligning very well with the tilted carbonate benches. Displaying the outcrop interpretation shows that the transition from diffracted to dipping reflectors corresponds nicely with the transition observed in the outcrop. Hereby we can confirm that the GPR facies nicely correspond to the Paleokarst breccias and the Minkenfjellet carbonates. Typing the GPR profile onto the virtual outcrop model nicely shows again how the GPR reflectors correspond to the outcrop observations. The last thing I'll show you for today is rather cute and of biological nature. In 2018, during summer field work, we had a polar bear mother with her cub come by to visit us 3 times. If you ever get to go to Fortet, you need to be careful. They like to relax on a flat behind the Rudnuspunten. If you then don't plan where to leave your equipment, you will get in trouble. As you can see, we were not prepared enough. Luckily, they only destroyed the water canisters and a sleeping mat. The survival suits, even though they were smelling of juicy, sweaty humans, were left untouched.
Okay, so that was Julian and his master, and also you have to have a polar bear in a webinar about Svalbard. Where do we have virtual outcrop models? This is the coverage straight from the website. It's updating all the time. This is resulting from one campaign last year for 1 week, and also a lot of master PhD projects and field excursions as part of different courses. In the future, we want to have much more dedicated campaigns, both in the summertime for the coastal outcrops and in the spring season on snowmobile for some of these exposed outcrops in the snow cover season. Few highlights, again, just to see that because we are including a lot of data, we can also use this data for research. It's a summary from actually this petroleum and coal and research drilling on Svalbard, published last year, as Tom already covered, the Festningen and linking to some of the deeper borehole, the Russian Kolsbukta, and also the American Ishögda nearby. We use Svalbox in outreach. Many tools like this, for example, is 3D printing of the terrain model. This is at the Longyearbyen Mesa. It's at 1 to 100,000 scale. Actually, because of COVID, I cannot have all of southern Spitsbergen yet, but I'm getting there. And we also try to test and use virtual reality tools. So actually, this is when Isabelle Niebuhr was still Minister of Education and visited UNIS, and she's testing here with Peter the 3D virtual reality system. We have to visit these outcrops also through that. And the picture below is me with our partners in Brazil, which are developing a much more suitable system. We can use this virtual outcrop or this method to make the virtual outcrop models also at much smaller scale. For example, to make core models. So it's a paper published earlier this year by Peter, where we have a turntable and takes a lot of images of, in this case, a caprock from the CO2 lab, and then can actually do bulk density measurements and so on that. Also unwrap it and compare that digital outcrop model with the televiewer data we have there. On the same procedure can be done to digitize hand samples. You can visit this one. It's a sample from Malta, and you can have a lot of detail about your hand samples and link these to the main models where they are coming from. And on the other side of scale, you can also take large scale virtual outcrop models like this few kilometer section of Cermaqfjellet, and then do synthetic seismic studies to see how do these outcrop look like on the seismic. Few challenges, opportunities with the pandemic. Of course, we, as everybody else in Norway, had to run all our courses digitally. In our case, the problem was also the students spread all over Europe because they were told to leave the island. And we had planned to have an excursion to the Billefjord Trough, which wasn't possible to do in real life, but we did it virtually. That was really only possible because of Svalbox. And there are actually the videos which both the teachers and the students made. They are all freely available on the Svalbox YouTube channel. And we plan to use this experience also to make it to other localities. So we have a fully operational portal, which we are extremely proud of. We see much more usage of it at UNIS and also partners. But we really need to secure a bit more longer term funding and sort of manpower to take it to a step where it can be used by outreach and research. I think it's just a question of time because we have a lot of belief in this. But I'd like to sort of wrap up this presentation by showing you the last video, which essentially introduces you to this free for all online portal on Svalbox. So that it allows you to actually go in after the webinar and actually explore it for yourself. So I'll show you that video and then I'll come back and I can answer any questions you have. The video is about 7 minutes long.
Welcome to a brief overview of the Svalbox online portal that provides easy access to Svalbard's geology. The Svalbox online portal is a digital front end for the Svalbox database. The database itself contains georeferenced, multi-physical, multi-scale data sets and provides fully interactive access to them. Part of these data sets are available interactively online through the Svalbox portal. The main features are accessed through the map surfaces, virtual model database, and virtual field trips quick links. The datasets are also accessible through the menu links in the top of the window and include such datasets as the Longyearbyen CO2 lab data, virtual models, other projects, e-learning activities, and the About and News pages. Svalbox's map interface allows you to interact with some of the data sets that are directly being streamed to the Svalbox online portal. Different data sets can be accessed through the Layers tab on the left-hand side of the screen and include feature layers from the Norwegian Polar Institute, such as the base map and satellite data, geology, as well as different feature layers that are accessible directly from the Svalbox data servers. These include drone footage, exploration well data, sedimentary log data, seismic data, and virtual outcrop models. Each of these features and data thereof, especially metadata, can be accessed by clicking on a feature, and then the data will show up in the Svalbox map interface towards the right-hand side on the screen. Here we are taking a closer look at the Longyearbyen area, and especially several of the data sets that we have available for Opplandfjorden and Opplandalen. So as you may have noticed, I've also toggled on the Norwegian Polar Institute geology dataset. And on any of these layers, you can click, and then information about either the geological unit or the dataset will pop up in the rightmost corner of the screen. One of the other features that we have in the area are actually some seismic data sets and information and metadata that is shared as the company has acquired a data set as well as a survey number. Especially in the Longyearbyen area, it's also of particular interest that we've got the Longyearbyen CO2 lab. And as such, we've got several of the metadata as well as some of the full data sets available that were acquired through this project. In this case, we're looking at the technical and geological data for the Longyearbyen CO2 lab borehole DH3. Just north of Longyearbyen, we find an example of a virtual outcrop model or a digital outcrop model. And by clicking on the polygon, you once again open and access the data in the inset view. And in this case, it actually opens up an interactive 3D model of the outcrop. We can translate and transform the model. And we can even zoom into key details and try to highlight key areas of interest. This works both in the inset as well as in a full screen mode, which can be accessed by going to the full screen window from within the inset. Once again, this is available for most of the models that we have digitized around Svalbard, and that's currently more than 50 and counting. To get a better idea of what kind of metadata is available, you can also click on the link to retrieve and access the metadata of this specific model. And that will take you up to the metadata page of the model. So this is one of those metadata pages I was just talking about. And we actually have the same model in the middle of the screen, which you can once again access and have a look at. But we also have a full metadata overview of the person who acquired it, the acquisition method, how many images were used, what kind of calibration method was used to give this model real-world coordinates, and things like resolution and the operator who it was acquired for. So all these models are more or less available and can be integrated in different workflows, such as automated fracture counting, fault mapping, and other workflows like that. Virtual models are also accessible by going to the virtual models link in the very top menu, which brings you to the virtual models page. Here we have a full overview of all the models that have been acquired as part of the Svalbox interface. And by clicking on any one of them, you will be brought to one of these metadata pages that was just shown for the Hamaskog-Elva outcrop model. The digital drill core models are accessed through the Longyearbyen CO2 lab page. This page also shows various wireline logs as well as sedimentary logs and some formations. And some of the icons actually display a small camera icon, and by clicking on these, you access the digital drill core models. And these all feature the same operations as the virtual outcrop models, which means you can rotate them, move them around, and zoom in, zoom out, as well as access the full screen mode. And finally, before forgetting about it, the Svalbox map interface also features drone footage. So there's currently a couple of drone icons displayed around the map. And by clicking on one of the drone icons, you actually open up either drone view 360-degree videos or transect videos and others which have yet to be updated and uploaded. Once again, these feature the same inset view as well as a full screen option. Finally, many of the features and videos and background reading that is found on a map and in the different model databases is integrated into key virtual field trips. The virtual field trip shown here actually documents the early Cretaceous dolerites in Spitsbergen and uses those videos and available media to integrate them all into a digestible virtual field trip. And that's it for now. We'd of course, like to thank the University of the Arctic as well as ArcX for providing us with some financial support, in addition to the full support from the UNIS Arctic Geology Department here in Svalbard. Welcome to a brief overview of the.
Okay, it concludes the Svalbox. Hopefully you get the overview what is included here, both on the internal part in Petrel and also on the external. And if you have any questions, please feel free to raise them now.
Thank you very much, Kim. It's a very impressive project you're running. So I see that Anders